Welcome to the Heat versus the World podcast. And now, stand up and make some noise for your host, Joel Jacob.
What's going on, Heat Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Heat vs. the World podcast. Like always, I'm your host, Joel Jacob, and you can follow me on Twitter at JoelKJacob_. Now, let's meet our guest for today. First, we got Quake.
What's up? This is the _Earthquake3 on Twitter. Give me a follow and watch out for new episodes of this pod.
And then right after that, we got George.
What's good, guys?
And just like that, we got our crew for today. So let's get started with today's episode and talk about this last game for the Heat, which was against none other than the Toronto Raptors. Miami won by 5, which helped improve their record to 28-16, while being just half a game away from being the best team in the Eastern Conference. Leading the way, you got Tyler Hero with 23 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. Jimmy Butler with the triple-double. He had 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. Gabe Vincent, who started in this game, he had 15 points, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. And then the returning Bam Adebayo with 14 points and 9 rebounds. With that being said, what's on y'all mind after watching the Heat snatch another victory? Kick us off, Quake.
Well, I think Bam's return is the number one takeaway. He didn't shoot well. He only shot 4 for 12, but he did pull down 9 rebounds. He hit 2 key free throws at the end of the game with over 8 seconds left to make it a 2-possession game. And defensively, he was everywhere last night. He showed why when it was reported that he was going to be out for a month or so, why I called him the Heat's most important player. He may not be the best player, but he is the most important in terms of this team's long-term success, postseason success. And everything that we saw last night was indicative to that point.
Right. And how about you, George?
Yeah, no, it's just so exciting to get players back in the swing of things. Spoelstra's going to have a really hard time trying to figure out the rotation now. He's got some key decisions to make with Dwayne Dedman and Amir. He's got, Caleb and, Max Strus coming off the bench, who's going to start there. He's going to, take most of the minutes there. But the biggest thing from yesterday's game was just how good defensively we looked when we wanted to be. With Bam coming back, and he's just, what an enforcer he's been for us just over the years. And you don't realize how much you miss it, but he's the biggest, most important player, in my opinion, when it comes to anything that this team's got to do defensively and offensively as well. He frees up so much space for so many good players. Duncan looked comfortable. Like, he only had 8 points, went 3 of 6, but my God, did he look comfortable, rolling the screen, getting over the screens with Bam. He looks at home, and Bam walked right back in the rotation after 6 weeks out. It looked like he hadn't missed a beat. Now, the stats weren't there. Offensively, he did struggle, but excuse me, when you've got this much pressure on you and you're also recovering from a wrist injury, that he's just been repaired. It's expected. You're not going to have the shooting touch you once had. It's just about getting those shots up, getting the repetitions in, and seeing what happens there. But it's just a good sight to have everyone back. Everyone played really well. I thought Gabe Vincent played very well as well, but he apparently had the worst plus minus on the team as well. So that it's just the matter of fact that you got to do more things than just score to be good on this team. Hero had a spectacular performance as well. Really lifted us when we needed to as well. Jimmy, he's already tied LeBron James as the Heat's most triple-double player in history, and he's played about 100 less games than him as well. So Jimmy's been nothing short of brilliant for us as well. But yeah, it's the time to really grind the season out. A lot of injuries for a lot of the other teams as well. Time to capitalize on that, get the standings up, and see where this team is headed.
Right. I agree 100%, and like I love that both of you guys brought up Bam, because that's what I want to talk about right now. And I want to talk about what Heat fans everywhere were talking about before the game and after the game. And that was just simply seeing Bam take the floor after missing those 22 games. So with that being said, like, how did it feel for you guys to see him on the floor last night? This time you can start us off, George.
As I was saying, he's just he brings a certain energy to this team as well. He even made Udonis Haslem hold up a sign saying welcome back, Bam, at the start of the game as well. So it's always good to see. But he's so crucial to this team on and off the court as well. In the locker room, he brings so much happiness, so much energy and vibe to this team that you can't replicate. You can't replicate at all. He was, the underdog coming in. We drafted him, and he was the long-term, project that worked out for us, and it didn't take that long either. He just was under Whiteside, came in. I didn't know why we picked another center, but knowing this center would be one of the top centers in the NBA and so important to this team is just so good to see. But the way he works with the other players is where I'm very happy about as well, because he just brings such a fluidity to the team. Defensively, he can run, he can swat, he can play some of the best on-ball D you'll find. And offensively, he brings another element because it frees up guys on the perimeter, and also gets his shot going, because if they're cooking and they're guarding the perimeter, he goes to work in the paint. Does it every week in, week out. But you saw, especially without him there, we were missing. Spoelstra was dialing in on certain aspects of the game that you need to be able to just rely on your plays with. He was bringing certain lineups in defensively, but Bam's that player that you can put in any lineup, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, and he'll get the job done. I'm surprised he actually played 32 minutes of the game, but I'm happy to see that he can actually handle the load in his back. And yeah, you can't overstate how good he's been for us over the years and how much he's going to continue being good for us.
Right. And how about you, Quake?
Well, you know how I feel. I was excited to see Bam back in the lineup. I think before he got injured, there were two sects of Heat fans. There was the camp that said that Bam wasn't being aggressive enough, rightfully, but there was also the camp that was, discrediting any contribution he made to the team whatsoever, because they thought that he was being passive and, things of that sort. So while Bam was out, I'm not sure how much those particular people saw his value to the team, given that the team was obviously still winning. But I think that in a potential Eastern Conference final versus Milwaukee, I think the whole fan base is going to be singing Bam's praises, because if we've seen anything through the 3 Milwaukee games, it's the fact that Bam is still the best Giannis defender in the NBA. So that's going to be a key swing factor as to whether the Heat win the East this year or not.
Right. And George, do you have something you want to add to this?
Yeah, no, it's really important to emphasize how good this guy can be when he's healthy. He's our Giannis stopper. He's when we play key matchups like the Nets, like the Bucks, Kevin Durant and Giannis are two of the most unguardable players you've ever seen in your lifetime. Yeah, they have to be, because if they're not, then you've got your list wrong. But Bam plays in such a way that doesn't matter 1 through 5, he'll shut everyone down. Now that's scary as a player. When you're getting guarded by him, you're getting locked up by him. It's so impressive to see that a guy that averages, close to the numbers of what you'd expect, but not even as good at 18, 10, and 3, that he brings so much more to the floor than what meets the eye. But that on-ball pressure is what Spoelstra wants, is what Spoelstra needed when Whiteside was in the lineup, that he wanted him to do, but just couldn't. And he's done everything like that and more. I think the more the way you got to look at it now is who you're going to complement him with in the starting lineup, whether it's going to be PJ Tucker, which is my personal pick, because you get another guy who literally shut down Giannis by himself this year when both Jimmy and Bam were out. And you also get someone that's leading the league in 3-point percentage, and one is one of the best corner shooters you'll ever see in your life. So it's just the matter around getting him back to normal, which won't be too long, but it's also about complementing the player that's beside him and the one that comes after him. If it's going to be Amir or Dedmon, depending on who you start as well. But yeah, look, it's one of those things. It's a wait and see situation. Can't take too much out of this game because he was coming back from injury. Those numbers will go up, but you won't see him shoot the ball less than 15, 20 times. That's what you want him to take 15 shots a game. You want to see your big man take 15 shots a game. And anything less would be a disservice to him and the team. So, it's just about fitting the system, getting back into the swing of things, and seeing what comes from it.
Right. And quick, do you have something that you want to add?
Not at the moment, no.
So honestly, and basically you guys summed it up perfectly. I mean, to have Bam back and, obviously he was a little rusty, but that's what you'd expect from him after being gone for that much time. He's going to play a huge role for this team, especially when it's time for the playoffs. Quake, you brought up a really good point about potentially having to play the Bucks. And we know how much of a threat Bam has been to Giannis. So to have him back, I feel like Heat fans everywhere should not take this man for granted anymore and should honestly be grateful about how much of the impact that he has on this team. So, it was great to see Bam back. And now I want to change the topic to something that's caught my eye as of lately. And a lot of people have been acknowledging this, especially last night. And that's the current depth of this Heat team. Being more than halfway through this season, do you guys believe that this Heat team is deep enough to potentially win a championship? Or do you guys think a couple changes could be made to put this team over the top? What's your take, Quake?
Well, I found it funny how after the Sixer game, Doc Rivers said that he's pissed off that the Heat keep getting these guys from the G League and whatnot. And I think that really speaks to the amount of depth that is on this team currently. I don't know necessarily that it's the deepest Heat team ever, as some fans I've seen have said, but I do know that it's deeper than any of the big three teams. The big three teams were carried by three superstars plus two defensive pests and Chalmers and Cole at point guard, as well as Ray Allen and a couple of shooters. But this Heat team really has guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot throughout the whole roster. Jimmy, Bam, Kyle Guy, who we picked up from the G League, Omer, Max Strus, Hero, you name it. So this is a very deep team. Now, I do think that the team can be improved. I think Duncan Robinson is the number one trade chip that this team does have presently. And I think that given the emergence of Max Strus and Kyle Guy, who looks to be an NBA player, it wouldn't surprise me if it didn't happen this season to see Duncan Robinson flipped during the offseason, preferably for a long-term solution at the power forward position, given that PJ Tucker is 35 years old, effective at 35 years old, but nevertheless 35 years old. So this is a very, very deep team. At some positions, the team goes three deep, but I do think that, again, Duncan Robinson is the guy to watch out for in any potential trade scenario.
Right. And how about you, George?
For me personally, this team, like I said, is like you guys have said, is the deepest team this franchise has ever seen. There's no, and no end ifs or buts about it. You've got guys coming off the bench, playing starting roles on a night-to-night basis, who look like they were meant to be starters. Like Max Strus in the stretch of those games that he started was one of the most phenomenal things I've seen. But he came in nearly averaging 22 points a game for a guy that was cut from roster to roster, we picked him up and turned him into a player that has this confidence now. You saw it in summer league. You saw it throughout the start of this season that they're meant to be NBA players. And so really good ones at that. Gabe Vincent looking like a really good option off the bench. He's the best backup point guard that this team could hope for. Now, do I think that this team could be improved? Absolutely. There's too much depth, in my opinion, at the guard position. I think that when you've got players like Duncan, Gabe Vincent, Hero, Strus, these players all require time. Now, the problem with that is there's only so much minutes going around. And if you're playing too guard heavy, you're sacrificing a lot of other things on the floor. So I've come up with one trade target for a team that looks to be really struggling this year with injuries and continuity and everything. And that's Robert Covington. Robert Covington is an extremely gettable player on a very manageable contract from a team in Portland that looks like they really could use the help. Now, do I think that he'll go quietly? Absolutely not. I don't think that Portland likes to deal players at their best of times, but if they're looking at a player that can really give you as much defensively as they can offensively, and that's Robert Covington. When you look at PJ Tucker, what he's done for us in the short time that he's been with us, he's given us this double-edged sword, this double kick of defense to offense, and it's the most beautiful thing to see when your role players are complemented perfectly to your stars, and that's what PJ is. So if I'm looking to move Duncan, it's for a contract for someone that's trying to win now. With Duncan, the problem with him is that as much as I love him as a player, and I really, really do, I was so happy when he started to flourish as a player and turned into one of the best three-point shooters in the league. The problem with giving him this massive contract is it comes with all the pressure of no longer being the undrafted player, but the player that just got paid. Now, when they put that title next to anything, it comes with this massive amount of added pressure, and and it commands a lot more respect from defenders. And you've seen it in his performances this year. When you see these streaky shooting nights, it's very it's hard to see, and the entire offense needs to be on its toes, trying to figure out how to get him open, and it really takes away from the game that others could be playing. So if I'm looking to move, I'm not saying he's a negative asset, but I'm saying someone on a pretty good contract. It's a long contract, but it's a good salary wise. To be moved for a guy like Robert Covington would probably be the perfect move, because as good as Caleb Barton has been, he's still undersized at 6'5". I know Spo how much he loves that small ball lineup where he plays him at the power forward position, but against bigger teams that actually have a lot of center depth and really tall forwards and good forwards, then it's just hard to see. You saw it against the Cavaliers when we versed a team with literally 5 centers. That when we were deficient of players, they ran rampant at us. They absolutely destroyed us in the paint, and it's so hard to see when you've got. Well, that's back when it was Dedman with Yurt coming off, but then when Dedman got hurt and we versed him again with Omer by himself, it was just too hard to see. So if I'm flipping anybody, it's Duncan Robertson, giving more minutes to Strus and to Martin in the guard positions, but bringing in a guy like with the veteran pedigree of Robert Covington, an ex-teammate of PJ Tucker's as well. You got to really, respect that. If the Heat are going to make a move, it's probably going to be for a veteran like that.
Right. And Quake, I know you got something you want to add.
Yeah, building off of what George said, the guard position on our team is this deep without Victor Oladipo. When he comes back, that adds an entirely new dynamic, but also a new conundrum in terms of who to play, how many minutes to play them, and things of that sort. And aside from that, one name that before I address that one name, I personally don't think that Duncan Robinson is going to be traded this season. I think if any trade with him happens, it's going to be in the offseason. Now, one name that comes to mind when thinking of a trade for this team, a minor trade, is Nicola Batum of the Los Angeles Clippers. If it's true that the Clippers are selling pieces, as has been rumored, then Batum would make a lot of sense for the Heat, primarily because he only makes $3 million. So it wouldn't take but so much to match salary in order to acquire him. And he would give us a 6'8" wing who we can throw at the Kevin Durant's of the world, the DeMar DeRozan's of the world, and players of that sort in the playoffs. We can save PJ Tucker for bigger, stronger fours, and it really just adds to our rotation defensively. So if it's true that the Clippers are looking to move off pieces, Batum is one guy that I would have my eyes on if I were the Heat.
Right. And George, how about you? Do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just want to ask the forgiveness of all the very loyal Oladipo fans that actually forgot about him. It just adds to the point that the shooting guard position is way too deep. There's a point where you can be very deep and too deep. Now, Spo can really manage that because he loves those small ball lineups. But if Oladipo comes back and he's playing anywhere near healthy, you're going to have to give him 25, 28 minutes a night minimum. And that's taking them the absolute mickey out of half the players in this roster who really, really deserve it, because you're cutting minutes from who? Duncan Robinson only played 17 minutes last night. Gabe Vincent maybe, who played 27, but that's never going to happen again. Probably when everyone's healthy and back into working order. But Spo's never going to run 10 deep, 12 deep, 11 deep. He's never going to do that. He ran 10 deep last night, and it was hard enough to see because as much as he was trying to split minutes because of Bam's return, Jimmy's existing injuries, PJ's age, there's only so many minutes that go around. So if Oladipo comes back healthy, who knows, he might even be a starter on this team, but I don't need to, I say it again, it's a hard position that Spoelstra's going to have to be in. He's going to have to work really hard with the front office to make it work. But if he does make it work, it's just going to make us a much better of a team as well.
Right. And Quake?
To your point, George, about not going 11 to 12 deep, which no playoff team would do, I think I've been saying it in the chat. I'm not sure that when he comes back, Markieff Morris, honestly, is going to be able to re-enter the rotation at this point. I personally envision a 10-man rotation. I see a starting lineup of Lowry, Duncan, Jimmy, PJ, and Bam, and then a bench of Oladipo, Hero, Strus, Caleb, and Dedmon. I think that rotation mixes well with what Spo wants to do at both ends. You have Caleb for perimeter defense. Strus is too good to take out of the rotation. I don't see Duncan being benched because I think there's just too much trust with Spo in Duncan. Being that Duncan has been a player who has been integral to the Heat for longer than just this season, obviously. So I don't see Duncan being benched, given that he was just yesterday reinserted into the starting lineup. So at max, I see a 10-man rotation. And it's difficult because, Omer Yurtseven was playing extremely well, especially in terms of rebounding. Gabe Vincent has proven to be a competent backup point guard, but at the end of the day, there's only so many minutes to go around. And typically, playoff coaches don't even play 10 players. They typically stay at 9, sometimes even 8. But in this case, I think 10 is the sweet spot. I think that's the perfect number.
And then, George, you got anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, no, it's just I think this team's perfect, can be perfect the way it is. It's just that it's just Spoelstra's game to play now, because if he's going to coach his ass off to make sure that we actually get this this lineup in working order. But I just feel like if we were to get that one more forward that could really give us the push, it's going to be someone like PJ Washington or Rocco as well. But yeah, look, it's probably not going to happen. But Pat's really not going to make any moves if we were just talking realistically. But if it does happen, then those are the players I want to see.
Right. And then, so also, I want to ask you, George, because I know, Quake, you brought this up. So, and you gave your opinion on it. Like, so George, who do you like? What do you think the rotation would be for the Heat?
Yeah, no, it's Lowry, Duncan, Jimmy, PJ, and Bam. If we're talking completely healthy, we've got our sixth man of the year in Tyler Hero. I'd like to see him start in the playoffs. I know it would probably won't happen because we're not going to contradict his role at the end of the season and risk what he's producing now. But the only factor is Oladipo, because if Oladipo comes back and he's playing way too good to bench in terms of defense and him cutting and shooting the three, if he does it even particularly well, you'd want to start him, especially in the playoffs. If you're running a lineup of Lowry, Oladipo, Jimmy, PJ, Bam, who's scoring? Who's scoring on them? Absolutely no one. Maybe the point guard, because Lowry is a bit old. He's getting up there, but there's no one scoring on that starting lineup. But if we're putting Duncan in there, it's going to go Tyler six man, Oladipo, Caleb Martin, because of his defense and shooting as well has been fantastic. Dwayne Dedman and Gabe Vincent, which pushes Max Strus back to the 11th spot, which is hard to see, but he'll play interchanging minutes with Martin as well, depending if we need more offense or defense. But Gabe Vincent as well is another factor, because if we're going to cut another guy out of the rotation, it's probably not going to be Oladipo if he comes back healthy. It's going to be Gabe Vincent. So, yeah, that's my opinion. Do I think it's going to work? I don't know, but it's definitely the most likely lineup if I'm looking at prior seasons and what Spoelstra expects from his team. But yeah, it's never going to run 11 deep. We're lucky if they reach 9 deep. It's just going to happen the way it happens. But it just depends on Jimmy's health, Bam's health, Lowry's health, and Tucker's health, because some of them are getting up there in age. Some of them have pre-existing injuries. But yeah, look, I think the rotation will basically sort itself out by the end of the All-Star break. A few weeks in after the All-Star break as well, you'll see a more solidified roster. There won't be so many changes, barring injuries, touch wood, for what we're going to see. But yeah, it won't be a big surprise coming to the playoffs.
Right. And, we basically, that was basically what both of you guys said was 100%. I agree, because at the end of the day, I'm looking back at this whole with the rotation thing. You guys brought up good points, and I do want to see where Spo decides to go with it, especially when we talk about this team's depth and how we got a lot of good pieces on this team. And regarding like a trade taking place, it is interesting because, George, you brought up PJ Washington, and then Quake, you brought up Nicholas Batum. Like, there are a lot of good names out there. And, it's interesting because I feel like with this season, and especially with this pod, we haven't really talked about trades that much compared to last season, because last season was a mess, so it seemed like it was something that we talk about every episode, because it's like a trade's gotta happen. So the fact that I feel like in this episode that this is probably like one of the rare times this season where we're actually talking about transactions and all that, I think this just tells you how good of a team this Heat team really is right now. But we'll see what happens. But now I want to change the topic up, and that's to discuss none other than the Spotlight Heat Player of the Week. You guys know how the segment works. So seeing the way how the Heat have played, going 3-1 this past week, tell us who your Spotlight Heat Player of the Week is. You can start us off quick.
Yeah, Haywood Highsmith. No, it's Omer at 7. He's a hell of a rebounder, and despite his flaws as a defender in space, I think his ability to crash the boards and score has caught the attention of everybody around him. It's caught Jimmy's attention. It's caught the attention of opposing coaches, Doc Rivers especially. And I think that despite the fact that he wasn't in the rotation yesterday with Dedman and Bam both being back, I think that he's shown that eventually he's going to factor into this team in a big way. So I'm going to go with Omer here at 7.
Right. And before I pass the mic to you, George, I also want to acknowledge that even Shaq was starting to acknowledge how good Omer is. But yeah, George, you got anything you want to do? Who's your spotlight Heat player of the week?
For me, it's a tie in my opinion between Caleb Martin and Tyler Hero. You know exactly what you're going to get from Tyler Hero. He's just been so consistent for us, barring the Sunday game against Philly. And we do not talk about it because it was a terrible game, and it will never happen again. I'm just joking, but you got to play game by game. But he's been phenomenal for us. His last 5 games, it was 33 points, 21, 24, 16, and 23, all off about 49% shooting, and about 50%, about 43% from 3. So you're taking if you take all of his offense into consideration, coming off the bench, that's ridiculous. For a guy that looks like he knows he wants to start, he wants to try and earn his role. He's doing it the right way because he's giving Spoelstra headaches by not starting him. And I understand that he's doing this because he's on the bench and because his role's changed up. It's giving him the confidence to do what he wants. I feel like it takes the pressure off his shoulders a little bit more as well. But over the last week, he's played phenomenal for us. He's still averaging, 20, 21 points a game off the bench. He's our 6th man. And yeah, he takes half of the award. The other half is Caleb Martin, because for a guy who was coming in as just an extra, defensive prowess is just so hard to find with these guys, because you've picked him up. He's already very good athletically, but to put everything together and to really, dial in on trying to be the best player he can be, he's done it. He's done it really, really well, because he over the last week he's had 10 points, 18, 2, 16, and 6, and consistently he's been one of the best players on the floor by far, top 3 every week. And from a guy coming off the bench and playing close to no minutes, it's like he went from averaging like 12 minutes a game in Charlotte to then over the last week he's got 30, 33, 21, 17, 21. For a guy to come in and to take a real massive chunk of the rotation and to do something with it is nothing short of spectacular. So those are my double Heat plays of the week.
Right. And for me, I'm going to take a different route, and I'm going to go with Jimmy Butler. This past week he made his return, and, I love the Hawks game specifically because, just to see him come back, and I'm talking about, what was it? I believe it was the second game, correct? If I'm being correct right now, so I'm reading the chat right now, but yeah, I know Jimmy did not have a good game against Philly, but if you look back at that game against Houston, see, you're distracting me, George. Come on now. If you look back at that game against Atlanta, like, just to see him back on the floor and make that dagger of a layup, with that left hand, it was just great to see. And seeing how hyped up he was, it was great because, obviously we were scared when he first went down a couple weeks back against Golden State. So to see him, continue to bring that energy that we know he's so capable of bringing in everything, it's just such a great sight to see. And then, this last game, he went and got the triple-double. And, I'm always going to be a Jimmy Butler stan no matter what. So I don't even give a frick that he had a bad game against Philadelphia. It was just a fluke loss. Just move on and, who cares? So anyways, to everyone that's watching this pod on 5 Reasons, the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel, we'd love to hear who your spotlight Heat player of the week is. So feel free to comment down below and tell us who your spotlight Heat player of the week is. So before we close this pod out, it's only right that we talk about this upcoming game for the Heat, and that will be none other against the Trailblazers. The last time these two teams played, Miami took care of business in Portland. Although Dame might still be out for them, it should be noted that CJ McCollum will be playing after recently returning from a collapsed lung. Also, we should acknowledge that we'll finally get a part 2 of the Hero versus Nurkic feud. In fact, rumor has it that the Hero brothers will be in attendance for this upcoming game to come to his brother's aid if necessary. But yeah, all jokes aside, what's everyone's expectations for this upcoming game? And do you guys see the Heat getting another win? Give us your prediction first, George.
Look, I just want to go back to a quick point that you made. Any player that had 1 point and went 1 for 11 does not win Heat Player of the Week. It just does not happen. I love Jimmy, but that was abysmal. It was abysmal, and he should be very upset. I'm just joking. He's fine. No, CJ McCollum has a history of doing quite well against us. So, like, he has on and off games, actually. He goes, last game, he had 17 points. Game before, he had 35. Then he had 33 4 games ago. He does well, but he plays better when he's complimenting his brother. Sorry, his brother. He's a teammate in Dame. But Portland have been a team that's been plagued with injuries over the last few weeks. But in the last 4 games, they're 3-1. So, and if you go even further, they're 5-1 in the last 6. So it's going to be a difficult matchup. It's just the way it is. But this team is very unhealthy right now, and they're missing their star player. We should be, frothing from the mouth to go after them now. There's no reason why we shouldn't win, but I don't make predictions after the Celtics game at the start of the season. It's traumatized me, and I'll never go back to it. But I'm gonna say that it should be a comfortable sort of game. It's another good game to get Bam back. He's going to have his hands full with their front court as well. Not a particularly great front court, but someone that that can present issues in Nurkic as well. But it's going to be a fun game. Tyler Hero gets into a scrap. All he has to do is lob the ball up to for Nurkic, and he'll go flying out of the arena because we know how good his lobs are. But let's just hope it doesn't come to where his brothers have to come to his help, because it's going to be dangerous if you see the Hero brothers versus Nurkic.
Right. I mean, like, the Hero brothers, they come from the war-torn state of Wisconsin. I don't think Nurkic wants to smoke with them. But yeah, quick. What do you think about this upcoming game?
I'm expecting the Heat to destroy Portland. I'm not impressed by any of Portland's recent wins. They beat an inconsistent Wizards team, a Kings team with no identity, and a Hawks team that is among the worst defensive teams in the league, especially on the perimeter. So I'm expecting the Heat to win this game and win it rather easily. Now, talking about players on Portland who I think could give the Heat problems, CJ McCollum is the one that comes to mind, but one player who I'm not counting out is Anthony Simons, who recently has played very well, with a 31-point game against Sacramento, a 23-point game against Brooklyn, and a 31-point game against Washington. He can really score, so I think he's somebody that the Heat have to keep on lock going into this game.
Right, I agree. I predict the Heat to win as well. And, that's actually a good point, Quake, because Simons has been hooping. And honestly, if there's anyone that I should expect to have a really good game against us, I wouldn't be surprised if it was him. But, this game will be big for Miami, not only because obviously you're trying to get the win, but also the Bulls will be playing the Cavaliers in Chicago. So the reason why I bring this up is because if Chicago loses and Miami gets the win this next game, Miami will move up to the 1 seed. So to those who are constantly watching the standings, let's see what happens. But anyways, we basically covered so much on today's episode. I feel like it's time to wrap it up. So I just want to say thank you all for listening to today's episode. And, if you want to check out more Heat vs. the World content, feel free to check out our Twitter and Instagram at HVTW Podcast, while checking out our website at hvtwpodcast.wordpress.com. Also, make sure to check out Culture Shock, the Heat vs. the World's newest extension show, and the first Miami Heat podcast to feature an all-women cast. They just dropped a new episode a couple days ago with a very special guest, so you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Heat vs. the World podcast, and we'll see you soon with another episode. We out.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of the Heat versus the World podcast.